Welcome to Fear Spiral, the place where your worst nightmares come alive. I'm Your Name, and tonight you're about to hear 10 true horror encounters that will make you question what lurks in the dark. From faceless figures silently following hikers, to cabins that appear and vanish, to roads that lead nowhere. Every story is real, told in first person, and more terrifying than you could imagine. These are the moments that happened in the dead of night, when the fog rolls in, the trees whisper, and the shadows watch. Every sound you hear, every creak and rustle, it's all part of the story. You might even feel like you're right there in the forest, the motel, or on the lonely highway. If you dare to listen, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment about which story chills you the most, and make sure your lights are on, because once the stories begin, there's no turning back. This is Fear Spiral, and your nightmare starts now.
The Man at the Hollow. It was a little past 11:30 p.m. when I drove down a narrow, winding road in the Appalachians. I had moved to a small town in West Virginia a few months prior, taking a seasonal job as a forest ranger. That night, I had stayed late at the ranger station, finishing paperwork and checking some trail cameras. On my way home, the moon was barely visible behind thick clouds, and the air smelled faintly of damp leaves and wet earth from an earlier rain. I usually felt safe driving through these hills, but that night the woods seemed heavier, quieter than usual. My headlights cut through fog that had begun settling over the road, and every tree that scraped against the wind seemed closer than it should have been. Around 11:50 p.m., I passed an old, abandoned cabin set back from the road. I had seen it before. It had been empty for decades, but something about the way it sat in the darkness made me slow down instinctively. The windows reflected the dim light from my truck, but I thought I saw movement, like someone standing just inside, staring at the road. I told myself it was my imagination. The wind was playing tricks. But as I drove further, I began to hear footsteps slow, deliberate behind my truck. At first, I thought it was just the gravel shifting in the tires, but the sound didn't move with me. My heart started pounding. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see a deer or a stray dog. But the fog obscured everything. By 12:05 a.m., the road narrowed, flanked by towering pines, and the air became colder, biting at my skin through the open window. Then I saw him. A man, standing right in the middle of the road, his back to me, perfectly still. My headlights hit him, and I noticed he was unnaturally thin, wearing tattered clothes that hung off his frame like rags. The smell hit me before anything else, a mix of decay and smoke. I slammed on the brakes, my truck sliding slightly on the wet asphalt. "Hey, move!" I shouted, my voice cracking. But he didn't budge. Panic flooded me. I shifted into reverse, planning to turn around, and as I glanced forward again, he was closer, too close. I swear he hadn't moved, and yet he had. My stomach churned. The sound of leaves crunching under bare feet echoed unnaturally loud in the silent forest. I tried to start the truck, fumbling with my keys. That's when I noticed something worse. His head tilted slowly toward me, and though I couldn't see his face clearly, I felt his eyes, piercing, empty, yet filled with an unnatural awareness. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking, sweat running down my spine. I finally got the truck in gear and hit the accelerator. As I passed him, I caught a glimpse of his face, pale, expressionless, with dark hollows where his eyes should have been. I don't know how fast I drove, but it felt like the forest stretched endlessly. By 12:20 a.m., I reached my cabin. I locked the doors and sat trembling in the dark living room. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a drifter, a prankster, someone homeless. But then I heard it, tapping at the window. Slow, deliberate, like knuckles against glass. I froze. The sound came from the window that faced the woods directly. I didn't dare look. I didn't move until dawn, when I finally summoned the courage to peek outside. The road was empty, no footprints, no signs of anyone. Just the fog lingering low among the trees. I never saw him again. I still drive that road every night, and sometimes when the fog rolls in thick, I swear I can feel him watching from the shadows, just beyond the edge of the trees. And every so often, I catch the faintest sound of footsteps following me home. The cabin that wasn't there. I never believed in haunted places or old wives' tales about the mountains. I grew up near a small Appalachian town, and after college, I took a summer job as a park maintenance worker. My shifts often involved hiking deep into the forest, checking cabins, and clearing overgrown trails. One weekend in late September, around 11:30 p.m., I ended up in a situation I still can't fully explain. It started as a routine night. I had been clearing debris near the edge of Pine Hollow, an area known for its steep hills and thick underbrush. It had rained that evening, and the mud clung to my boots as I made my way back toward the service road. The forest was quiet, unusually quiet. No rustling squirrels, no frogs in the creek, just the wind whispering through the pines. I had my flashlight, my radio, and a small backpack with snacks and a thermos of coffee. The moon was nearly full, but clouds had swallowed most of its light, leaving the forest shrouded in shadow. Around 11:50 p.m., I heard a snapping sound behind me. My stomach tightened. At first, I thought it was just a deer or raccoon in the brush, but the sound was deliberate. A branch snapping under bare feet, not hooves. I stopped and listened. Nothing, only the whispering wind. I told myself I was imagining things and kept walking, though my pace quickened. By 12:10 a.m., I reached the old service trail that led to the maintenance cabins. That's when I saw it, or at least, I thought I did. A faint light glimmered between the trees, almost like a lantern. The problem was, I knew every cabin in the area. I had walked this trail dozens of times. There was no cabin here. No light. Nothing but dense forest. Curiosity mixed with unease, and I cautiously approached. The further I went, the clearer it became that this wasn't a trick of my eyes. There it was, a small wooden cabin, appearing as if it had grown out of the earth overnight. Its boards were darkened with age, windows covered in grime. Smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney, even though there was no sign of a fire. The smell hit me before I even stepped closer. Wood smoke, damp earth, and something else. Something faintly metallic, like iron and decay. I froze. Something about the cabin felt off, too still. No sound of animals nearby, no movement inside. I called out softly, "Hello, anyone here?" My voice was swallowed immediately by the thick forest. No answer. My heart began to hammer. I wanted to turn back, to run, but my curiosity or foolishness pushed me forward. By 12:25 a.m., I was standing in front of the cabin's door. The wood was warped and rough, cold to the touch despite the faint smoke coming from the chimney. I tried the handle, locked, of course. But then I noticed something strange. Shallow scratches along the edge of the door, almost like fingernails scraping the wood. I recoiled, the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Inside. Slow, deliberate. Circling. I pressed myself against the door, shining my flashlight through a small crack. Nothing moved inside, yet I could hear the sound of someone pacing. I whispered, "Who's there?" My voice trembled. Silence, then a faint rasping laugh. A low, unnatural chuckle that made my stomach twist. I stumbled back, tripping over a root. My flashlight tumbled to the ground, and when I bent to pick it up, the cabin door creaked open on its own. The faint yellow glow of a lantern illuminated the interior. There was a table, a chair, and a fireplace that wasn't lit, yet the air smelled of smoke. And then I saw it, a figure, standing at the far corner, motionless, its back to me. No discernible features, only the outline of a human. And yet, something about it was wrong. Too thin, too stiff like a mannequin. My throat went dry. I whispered again, but no sound came out. I wanted to run, to turn around, but my feet felt rooted to the mud-soaked ground. Then it moved. Not toward me, but its head turned slowly, impossibly slowly, until I could see its face. Pale, hairless, eyes wide, black, reflecting the dim light like polished stones. No mouth, or maybe a mouth that didn't move. My heart froze. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but I couldn't. I backed away slowly. That's when I heard the scratching again, closer this time, behind me. I spun around. The forest was empty. Only shadows between the trees. The cabin door slammed shut with a deafening bang. I jumped, tripping again, my flashlight rolling away. Panic clawed at my chest. I ran. Branches whipped against my face and arms, roots tugging at my boots. I didn't look back until I reached the service road, gasping and soaked in sweat. I expected the cabin to be gone, and it was, or so I thought. In its place was just dense forest, pitch black, no signs of a building ever existing there. The mud was undisturbed. No footprints, nothing. I ran all the way back to the ranger station. By the time I reached the cabin around 12:55 a.m., I was shaking, drenched, and nearly hyperventilating. My coworkers were asleep inside. I tried to explain, but I sounded insane, even to myself. I checked the trail cameras later, nothing unusual. No signs of smoke, no cabin, nothing. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the figure's pale face, the black eyes staring at me. I tried to rationalize it. Exhaustion, stress, my mind playing tricks. But the metallic, decaying smell, the laughter, the scratches, they weren't imagination. The following morning, I returned to the area with colleagues, searching every inch of the forest. No trace of the cabin, no smoke, no footprints. Only the usual forest smells: wet pine, mud, and decay from fallen leaves. I tried to put it behind me, convincing myself it was a hallucination. I told myself I would never go near that part of the forest at night again. Weeks later, though, the memory stayed with me. I avoided the trail entirely, even during the day. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and the wind whispers just right, I swear I can see the faint glow of a lantern between the trees, just beyond the edge of the road. Sometimes I hear the rasping laugh, faint, almost teasing, carried on the wind. I don't know what I saw that night. A ghost? Something else? Or a trick of my mind? All I know is that the forest isn't always empty. And the next time you walk Pine Hollow after dark, you might see a cabin that wasn't there. The hiker who followed me. I've been hiking in the Appalachian Mountains since I was a teenager. Usually it's a peaceful escape, quiet streams, rustling leaves, and the scent of pine after rain. I'm 27 now, and I work as a freelance photographer. So I often combine hiking with taking photos for travel blogs. But one night in early October, a hike I thought would be routine turned into something I'll never forget. It started around 8 p.m. I had parked my car near the trailhead of Black Hollow, a dense stretch of forest that's popular during the day but almost deserted at night. I had planned an overnight hike, bringing a small tent and minimal gear, planning to camp near a creek I knew about a few miles in. The air was crisp, a bit chilly, carrying the faint scent of damp earth from a drizzle earlier that evening. Mist clung to the low valleys, and the forest was almost unnaturally still as I began walking. Around 9:15 p.m., I reached the first ridge. The path narrowed here, flanked by tall trees that blocked out the moonlight. My flashlight cut a small circle of light through the darkness. That's when I first heard it: footsteps. Not mine, not the soft scuff of my boots on the damp dirt, but deliberate, measured steps behind me. I froze, listening. The sound stopped when I stopped, resumed when I moved. At first, I told myself it was another hiker. Maybe someone finishing a day hike, but this was Black Hollow. Most hikers turn back well before nightfall. I quickened my pace, trying to see if the footsteps would match mine. They did. Whatever was behind me was keeping pace perfectly. My stomach twisted. My breathing grew faster. By 10 p.m., I reached a clearing near a small stream. I crouched low, hoping to spot the other hiker. Nothing, just the forest. Silent except for the soft rush of water and my own heart thudding in my chest. I called out softly, "Hello, is someone there?" My voice echoed faintly. No answer, only silence, thick and heavy. I decided to set up my tent near the clearing. As I worked, I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced someone or something was watching. Around 10:30 p.m., I saw a movement among the trees. A figure, standing just at the edge of the clearing. Too dark to make out details, but unmistakably human-shaped. I froze. It didn't step forward, didn't call out. It just stood there. I whispered, "Hey, do you need help?" Nothing. My instinct screamed to run, but I didn't want to leave my gear or the trail. I kept working, trying to act normal. But the figure didn't move. And then slowly, it tilted its head toward me. I could barely see it, but its presence was overwhelming, unnatural. By 11 p.m., I was inside my tent, zipping it closed, heart racing. I tried to convince myself it was a local camper, someone joking, or a deer mistaken for a person. I pulled out my phone to check the time. No signal, typical for Black Hollow. I told myself to calm down, but the rustling outside didn't stop. Something or someone was circling the tent. The sounds were deliberate. A brush of leaves, a soft scrape against bark, a faint crunch of dirt. At 11:20 p.m., I unzipped the tent slightly to peek outside. Nothing. I shone my flashlight around, but the mist distorted everything. Then I noticed a shadow moving along the tree line, just at the edge of the light. I froze, and then I heard a voice, barely more than a whisper, "I'm right behind you." I jumped back, dropping my flashlight. The tent lit up briefly in a harsh beam as I grabbed it, but when I shone it outside, the figure was gone. Heart hammering, I wrapped myself in a blanket and tried to stay calm, but then the footsteps returned, circling my tent. Slow, deliberate, almost mocking. I couldn't see where they came from, but they moved with precision, stopping whenever I held my breath. By 12 a.m., I decided I couldn't stay in the tent. I needed to get out, get back to my car. I packed my gear quickly, trying to make as little noise as possible. My flashlight flickered as I shined it down the trail. I began walking, fast, almost running. And then I heard it again, clearly this time, the soft crunch of boots on dirt, perfectly in time with my steps. I ran. Branches lashed against my arms and face, roots snagged my boots. The forest seemed endless, the path twisting and turning unnaturally. Every time I glanced back, I saw a shadow, glimpsed a shape moving among the trees. Nothing I could identify, but its presence was undeniable. My breath came in ragged gasps. Panic and adrenaline made my vision tunnel, focusing only on the path ahead. By 12:25 a.m., I reached a familiar bend in the trail where the path widened slightly. I stopped, gasping, trying to catch my breath. That's when I saw it again. Standing a few yards away, perfectly still. This time, the mist had cleared just enough for me to see it clearly. A man, tall and unnaturally thin, with pale skin that seemed almost luminescent in the dim light. His eyes, I can't describe them, black, empty, but aware. I felt like he could see every thought, every fear, every weakness. I screamed and ran faster than I ever had in my life. My flashlight bobbed wildly, casting grotesque shadows on the trees. The figure didn't chase me, At least not in a conventional sense. He just followed. Always behind, always keeping pace without ever breaking stride. Every time I stopped, he stopped. Every time I ran, he ran. By 12:40 a.m., I reached the service road. The familiar lights of the small town in the distance gave me hope. I ran onto the asphalt, my boots slipping on the wet surface, and finally saw a car approaching. I waved my arms frantically. The driver slowed, rolled down the window. I shouted, barely coherent, "Help! Someone's following me!" They looked confused, muttered something, and drove off slowly. I ran after the car, screaming, until I collapsed near a gas station. People came out. I tried to explain. My voice was shaking so badly that it barely made sense. When I finally caught my breath, I told them someone or something had been following me through the forest. They looked at me like I was insane, told me to calm down. I didn't argue. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I went back to Black Hollow with a friend during daylight. Nothing. The trail was empty, quiet, peaceful. No sign of the man, no disturbance in the dirt, no tracks. I checked every inch of the forest near where I had been, and still nothing. Weeks passed. I returned to the trail during the day occasionally, always with a friend, and never saw him again. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I can hear soft footsteps behind me in empty streets or quiet parking lots. I know it sounds crazy, but the memory is burned into me. Those black, empty eyes staring from the mist, the way he mirrored my every move, the rasping sound of his breath even when I knew he wasn't there. I don't know if he was human, a ghost, or something else entirely. All I know is that he's out there, somewhere, waiting, following, patient. And the thought that he could appear anytime just behind me, unseen, keeps me awake at night. I don't hike Black Hollow after dark anymore. I don't go into the forest alone. And every time I hear footsteps when I'm alone, I swear I hear them matching my own, because he's still there, watching, waiting, following.
I've always been the type to drive late at night. Part of it is that I like the solitude, the quiet hum of tires on asphalt, the way headlights slice through darkness. I grew up in a small Appalachian town and often traveled the winding back roads between towns and forests. But one night in early November, I experienced something I still can't rationally explain, something that's haunted me every time I drive alone since. It started around 11:10 p.m. I was returning from a photography assignment in a neighboring county, driving along State Route 76, a two-lane road that cuts through dense forests and hills. The night was cold, fog beginning to settle over the road, the air thick and damp. Rain had passed earlier, leaving a slick shine on the asphalt. I had my heater on, music low, and my phone mounted on the dashboard showing a GPS route back home. I was alone, completely. Or so I thought. By 11:35 p.m., I had passed a familiar stretch, a sharp curve near an abandoned gas station that's been closed for years. I slowed down to navigate the curve safely. That's when I noticed something strange. The road ahead didn't look right. The trees, the guardrails, even the curve itself, it was different. Subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. But as I drove closer, the pavement seemed narrower, overgrown patches creeping from the sides, and a low mist hugged the surface. I laughed nervously. "It's probably the fog," I muttered to myself. I followed the curve, gripping the steering wheel tighter. But the road, it didn't curve as it should have. It went straight, cutting through what I swore was a hill. Trees leaned inward unnaturally, their branches forming shapes that almost looked like fingers reaching out. My chest tightened. I glanced at my GPS. It showed the road continuing normally, but outside my windshield, the path seemed wrong, unfamiliar. By 11:50 p.m., panic began creeping in. The fog thickened, curling around my headlights like smoke. The air smelled damp, but there was a faint, acrid tang I couldn't place, metal and rot. Every few seconds I thought I saw movement at the edge of the fog, shadows that weren't quite trees. I blinked, and they were gone. My hands were sweating, gripping the wheel tightly. Heart hammering, I muttered, "Just drive, just drive." Then I saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the road, barely visible through the fog. At first I thought it was a deer or a hitchhiker, but it didn't move, just stood there, rigid. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching. The figure didn't flinch, didn't move. It was tall, impossibly thin, wearing a long coat that hung like wet rags. Its head tilted slightly, as if observing me. I shouted, "Move! Get out of the road!" My voice sounded weak and foolish against the dense silence. The figure didn't respond. I revved the engine, ready to swerve, but as I looked closer, I realized it had no face, or at least no features I could discern. Only smooth, pale skin where eyes, nose, and mouth should be. My stomach dropped. I took a deep breath and swerved slightly, praying I wouldn't hit it. The tires splashed over shallow puddles. When I glanced back toward the road, the figure had moved. Closer. Faster than humanly possible, keeping pace with me even as I drove at over 50 miles per hour. My pulse exploded. I tried to shake my head, thinking my mind was playing tricks, but it was real. By 12:05 p.m., I saw an intersection ahead, a route that should have led back to my town. Relief washed over me, but as I approached the road, it disappeared. Literally disappeared. The asphalt ended abruptly, merging into dense forest. Trees grew impossibly close together, blocking any path forward. My GPS insisted I keep going, but there was no road. Only mist, trees, and darkness. I slammed the brakes, heart hammering. The figure emerged from the fog behind me, standing on the shoulder now, tilting its head as it watched me. I grabbed my phone, desperate for a signal. None. My radio? Static. Nothing. I was completely alone, trapped in a corridor of fog and trees with this thing watching me. I tried reversing, but the road behind me had changed too. The guardrails weren't where they should have been. The curve I had just driven through didn't exist. Every direction looked like the same dense, oppressive forest. Panic overtook me. I turned the wheel wildly, desperate for any recognizable landmark. The figure followed, gliding almost, silent, keeping pace no matter which way I turned. By 12:20 p.m., I was hyperventilating, sweating despite the chill. I shouted at it, "What do you want?" My voice echoed strangely, muffled by the fog. No answer, only the figure. Closer now, emerging into the pale circle of my headlights. Its coat hung heavy and wet, dripping with I don't know what. I couldn't see its hands, but I could feel its attention, like it was reaching inside my chest and gripping my fear. I slammed my truck into drive and pressed the accelerator. Tires spun on slick asphalt patches, but the fog seemed to swallow the sound. The trees bent closer, almost alive. I thought I could feel them brushing my windows, scratching at the sides of the truck, and the figure, still there, moving impossibly, keeping pace no matter which way I turned. Then, as abruptly as it had started, the forest thinned. The fog lifted slightly. The trees parted, and I saw the familiar lights of a gas station far ahead, the one I had passed before. I slammed the brakes momentarily, hoping I had escaped. The figure was gone. No sign of it. No footprints. Nothing. Just fog retreating into the tree line. I pulled into the gas station, hands shaking so badly I could barely start the engine. The clerk looked at me strangely as I muttered, someone, it was following me. They nodded politely, but clearly thought I was spooked out of my mind. I didn't argue. I didn't sleep that night, sitting in my truck with the heater on full blast until dawn. The next day, I drove the same route in daylight. Everything looked normal. The curve, the intersection, the forest. It was exactly as it should have been. No sign of disappearing roads, no trace of the figure. My rational mind tried to convince me it was exhaustion, hallucination, maybe the fog playing tricks. But my body remembered. The metallic, damped smell, the unnatural silence, and the figure's faceless stare. I don't take that road at night anymore, and I avoid foggy nights altogether. But sometimes when I hear the faint scrape of tires on asphalt or the whisper of wind through the trees, I swear I can see it in my mind's eye. Faceless, patient, and impossibly fast. Waiting for the road to vanish again. And I know that if it does, I might not escape next time. The cabin in the fog. I've always loved the mountains at night. The way fog rolls through the valleys, thick and silent, muffling every sound. I'm a 29-year-old park ranger, and I frequently patrol the forested areas of the Appalachians at night. It's usually quiet, peaceful work. But one night, in late October, I experienced something I still can't explain. It started around 10:45 p.m. I was driving a narrow service road deep into Black Pine Ridge, a section of forest with little traffic and even less cell reception. My shift had ended late, and I was returning to the ranger station after checking some trail cameras and clearing a fallen tree from one of the hiking paths. The air was cold and damp from earlier rain, and a thick layer of fog had begun to settle over the road. The world seemed muted, as if sound itself had been swallowed. Around 11 p.m., I passed a familiar abandoned cabin near a small clearing. I had checked it before. It had been boarded up for years, and there was no sign of anyone living there. But something made me slow down. The fog made the cabin look different, almost alive. My headlights reflected off the damp boards, and I could have sworn I saw movement inside one of the windows, a shadow shifting slightly. I told myself I was imagining things. The forest plays tricks on the mind, especially at night. I continued driving, but then I heard it, a faint tapping, like fingernails against wood. My pulse jumped. It was coming from the cabin. I tried to rationalize. A branch scraping against a window, maybe an animal trapped inside. But it sounded deliberate, patterned. Tap, tap, tap. By 11:15 p.m., I parked my truck near the cabin, flashlight in hand, heart hammering. The fog clung to my jacket, cold and wet, making my skin prickle. I stepped cautiously toward the front door. The tapping stopped abruptly. Silence. Only the occasional rustle of leaves, the drip of water from roof eaves. "Hello?" I called softly. My voice seemed to vanish into the fog. No answer. I crouched low, shining my flashlight through a crack in the boards covering the window. The inside was dark, empty, as it should be. I relaxed slightly and muttered, "Just nerves, it's late." Then I saw it. A figure, standing near the far corner of the cabin, motionless, too tall, thin, and stiff to be human. My stomach sank. I froze. Its head tilted slowly, unnaturally toward me. Even in the low light, I could see its pale, almost luminescent skin. No features, just a blank, smooth face. My hands went cold. I whispered, Who are you?" No answer. The figure didn't move toward me. It didn't even breathe, or at least I couldn't see any motion. But I felt its awareness, like it could see every thought racing through my mind. Fear rooted me to the spot. I backed away slowly, trying not to turn my back. By 11:25 p.m., I realized I needed to leave.
I turned and stumbled back to my truck, tripping over roots hidden in the fog. The figure didn't follow, or at least, not visibly. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I could swear I saw it standing behind the fog, watching me. My chest tightened. The hair on my arms stood up. I started the truck and drove slowly, fog swirling around the headlights. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was exhaustion, imagination, maybe a trick of the light. But the air was heavy, thick with the metallic, decaying smell of wet earth and something else I couldn't identify. Something wrong. Around 11:40 p.m., the fog thickened even more. My headlights barely penetrated 20 feet ahead. That's when I heard it, a soft whisper, carried on the wind, just a word, almost indistinguishable, but unmistakable. Come. I slammed my hand on the horn, and the figure appeared suddenly at the edge of the road. I swerved violently, heart hammering, and it didn't move as I passed. It was just there, frozen, watching me. My stomach churned. I floored the accelerator, tire skidding on wet asphalt, branches scraping against the sides of the truck, leaves hitting the windshield, and I could feel the cold stare of the figure in my peripheral vision. By 11:50 p.m., I reached a familiar bend in the road, hoping to escape the nightmare. But the road ahead wasn't there. Fog swallowed everything. Trees grew unnaturally close, their trunks twisted, blocking any view of where the road should continue. I slammed on the brakes, heart hammering. I tried reversing, but the road behind me had changed too. The fog was alive, shifting, thickening, hiding the familiar trail. And then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling the truck. Not on the road, but all around me. I shone my flashlight into the fog, but it was useless. The figure, I couldn't see, yet I could feel its presence. My chest tightened. Every nerve screamed at me to flee. I shouted, "Who's there?" The wind swallowed my voice, carrying back only silence and the soft, scraping sound of feet against dirt and leaves. By midnight, I was hyperventilating, shaking violently. I couldn't see the figure, but I could feel it, like a weight pressing through the fog. My headlights flickered, and in those brief moments of darkness, I thought I glimpsed the figure inside the cab of my truck, standing silently. I slammed the truck into drive, swerving blindly through the fog. Every turn led to more trees, more twisting, narrow passages. The forest seemed endless. Around 12:10 a.m., I finally broke through a thinner section of fog. A familiar sign appeared, the ranger station, distant but illuminated by the faint glow of the porch light. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. When I reached the station, I got out, shaking, soaked with sweat and cold. I looked back toward the foggy road. Nothing. The forest was still, silent, empty. I told myself I had imagined it. Exhaustion, stress, maybe a trick of the fog and moonlight. I tried to sleep that night, but every creak of the ranger station, every rustle of leaves outside made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me, always watching, patient, waiting. Weeks later, I returned to the same section of Black Pine Ridge during daylight. The cabin wasn't there. Nothing but the forest, normal and silent. No footprints, no sign of the figure, no disturbance in the leaves. Everything was exactly as it should be. Yet at night, when the wind blows through the trees in just the right way, I can still hear the faint tap, tap, tap of something calling me back to the fog. I've never gone back after dark, and I never will, because I know it's still there, waiting, watching, patient.
The Hitchhiker Who Vanished. I was 25 at the time, working part-time as a night shift delivery driver in a small Appalachian town. The job required long drives along remote roads, often after midnight. I'd driven these roads countless times and never had an issue, until one October night that still haunts me. It was around 11:50 p.m. when I was heading back from a late delivery in a neighboring town. The air was cool and damp, the sky mostly clear, with a faint mist rolling over the hills. My truck's headlights cut a narrow path through the winding two-lane road, surrounded by dense forest. The only sounds were the tires on wet asphalt and the occasional rustle of wildlife. By 12:05 a.m., I had rounded a particularly sharp bend near an abandoned farmhouse. That's when I saw him. A man standing at the side of the road, thumb extended in a hitchhiking gesture. At first, I hesitated. I rarely pick up strangers at night, especially on these remote roads. But there was something about the man that made me stop. Maybe it was the desperate look in his eyes, or maybe I was just too tired to care. I slowed to a stop and rolled down the window. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Just up the road," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, almost hollow. He looked young, maybe early 20s, but his eyes were odd, too dark, too hollow, like he'd seen something terrible. He climbed in without hesitation, muttering thanks. At first the ride was normal. We drove in silence, the faint hum of the engine filling the cab. The air smelled damp and cold, like wet leaves and earth. I glanced at him occasionally. He didn't speak much, just stared out the window, shoulders hunched, hands clasped together. By 12:20 a.m., I noticed something strange. He wasn't reflecting in my rearview mirror. No silhouette, no movement. I blinked, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks in the dim light. I called out, "Hey, are you okay back there?" No answer. I slowed the truck, my heart starting to race. "Hello?" Still nothing. I glanced to the side. He was sitting there, but somehow wrong. His head was tilted too far back, his eyes fixed straight ahead. His lips didn't move when he breathed. I tried to focus on the road. My hands trembled on the wheel. By 12:35 a.m., I was deep in a stretch of road surrounded by fog and trees so close I could barely see the edges of the asphalt. The truck's headlights barely penetrated the mist. Then I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. Shadows flitting just outside the fog, shapes that weren't trees. My pulse quickened. "Are you messing with me?" I muttered aloud. My voice shook. That's when I felt a chill, sharp and biting, crawling over my neck and down my spine. I glanced at him, and my blood ran cold. His face was gone. Not obscured, not in shadow. Gone. Nothing but smooth, pale skin where his features should have been. I screamed, slamming on the brakes. Tires screeched. The truck skidded slightly on the wet road. I spun around to look in the back seat. Empty. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rust and decay. My hands shook violently. I checked the passenger seat. He wasn't there either. The seatbelt was still buckled, stiff as if it had just been fastened. I floored the accelerator, heart hammering. I didn't look back. Every shadow outside the cab seemed alive, reaching toward me, pressing against the fog. The road twisted unnaturally. I could feel my pulse in my ears, deafening. By 12:50 a.m., I reached the edge of town. The fog began to thin, and streetlights appeared ahead. I slammed the truck into park, shaking, drenched in sweat. I didn't dare check the back seat. I just sat there, trembling, listening to the silence. The air smelled normal again. Damp earth and gasoline, nothing else. The next day, I drove the same road during daylight. Everything looked normal. No fog, no shadowy figures, no hitchhiker. But I couldn't shake the memory of those hollow eyes, the way he vanished, and the metallic scent that lingered in the cab. Weeks later, I was parked outside my apartment around 11:30 p.m., having returned from a late-night run to the grocery store. I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the lot, thumb extended. My stomach sunk. I blinked, Nothing. The lot was empty. But the feeling, the suffocating, cold dread, didn't leave me. I'm 26, and I work as a wilderness guide during the weekends, leading small groups through remote trails in the Appalachian Mountains. I've spent hundreds of nights in the forest, camping under the stars, navigating by moonlight. I like being alone out there. It feels peaceful. But one night, in late September, I had an experience that I can't explain, and I still wake up sweating thinking about it. It was around 9:30 p.m. when I left the trailhead at Black Bear Hollow, heading toward a small ridge where I had planned to set up a campfire for the night. The forest was quiet, unusually quiet. The wind had died down completely, and even the usual night sounds, crickets, rustling leaves, distant owls, were absent. I carried a small backpack, a flashlight, and my camera. The path was narrow, twisting through dense woods, and the ground was damp from a recent drizzle. By 10 p.m., I reached a clearing near a small stream. I paused to drink water and adjust my pack. That's when I heard footsteps, soft, careful, almost deliberate, behind me. I turned quickly, flashlight sweeping over the trail. Nothing. I told myself it was probably another hiker, though it was late and most people would have already turned back. I kept moving, but the footsteps followed. Every time I stopped, they stopped. Every time I ran, they ran. My pulse quickened. My heart was pounding, and the hairs on my neck stood on end. I whispered into the dark, "Hello? Who's there?" The forest responded only with silence, thick and heavy. By 10:30 p.m., I reached a familiar stretch of trail lined with tall pines. That's when I saw someone, or thought I did. A figure standing at the edge of the clearing. Too far to see details clearly, but unmistakably human-shaped. I froze. It didn't move. I called out again, louder this time. "Hey, are you following me?" No answer. Just the soft whisper of leaves in the wind. I felt a chill run down my spine. The forest suddenly felt different, heavier. I tried to focus on the path ahead, but the figure seemed to be everywhere at once, sometimes to my left, sometimes glimpsed in the shadows behind me. I started walking faster, my flashlight trembling in my hand. By 11 p.m., I was nearly at the ridge where I intended to camp. I kept glancing over my shoulder, heart hammering. The footsteps had stopped, replaced by a faint rustling, like someone moving through leaves, careful, but deliberate. I tried to convince myself it was a deer or some other forest animal, but instinct told me otherwise. Then I heard it. My name. Soft, distant, carried on the wind. Ethan. I froze. My blood ran cold. My heart skipped a beat. Only one person in the world knew I was hiking that night. I spun around, flashlight scanning the trees. Nothing. Just the mist rolling in low, curling around the trunks like fingers. I whispered, "Who's there?" My own voice sounded thin and fragile in the quiet. By 11:15 p.m., panic overtook me. I picked up my pace, trying to make it to the ridge. That's when I felt it. A presence right behind me, moving with me, just out of sight. I dared a glance backward. Nothing. My flashlight flickered. When it came back on, I saw a figure standing on the trail a few meters behind me. Same height, same build as me, but entirely featureless.
No face, no eyes, no mouth, only pale skin and an unnatural stillness that made my stomach twist. I ran. Branches whipped against my arms, roots snagged my boots, mud squelched beneath me. Every sound I made seemed amplified, echoing through the empty forest. I dared not look back, but I could feel it, its presence, moving with me, patient, deliberate. By 11:30 p.m., I reached the ridge. The moonlight revealed the clearing where I intended to set up camp. Relief washed over me. I thought I had escaped. But as I glanced toward the trailhead, my stomach dropped. The path behind me was gone. No trail, no footprints, only dense forest and mist. Trees had grown impossibly close together, twisting in ways they hadn't before. The forest had shifted, and then I heard it. A voice, whispering from the fog, "Stay." I spun around. Nothing. Just mist, curling among the trees. I tried to call for help, but my phone had no signal. The forest felt alive, watching. The hairs on my arms stood on end. My flashlight flickered again, and in that brief darkness, I thought I saw multiple figures in the trees, all featureless, all waiting. By 11:45 p.m., I realized I couldn't stay. I had to escape. I picked a direction, any direction, and ran blindly through the thickening fog. Branches scraped my face and arms, roots snagged my boots. Every step felt endless. The forest twisted unnaturally. Every now and then, I thought I glimpsed the figure ahead of me, standing perfectly still, watching. By midnight, exhausted and drenched in sweat, I stumbled onto a familiar dirt road. My truck was parked at the edge, headlights off, exactly where I had left it. Relief washed over me, but I dared not look back into the forest. I got in, locked the doors, and drove off without a second thought. The next day I returned to the ridge during the daylight. Nothing. No trail changes, no figures, no footprints, nothing. The forest was normal, peaceful, silent, but the memory of that night stayed with me. The feeling of being followed, the voice whispering my name, the presence moving with me, patient, deliberate, and inescapable. Weeks later, I hiked another trail at night, this time with a group. I still felt it sometimes, at the edge of vision, in the fog, or when a shadow moves strangely in the trees. I know what I saw wasn't human. I know it was waiting, watching, and one night it won't let you leave. Because in the forest, there are things that follow. Patient, silent, faceless. And one night, they won't let you leave.
The cabin door that opened itself. I'm a 28-year-old wildlife researcher, often working in the forests of southern Appalachia. Most of my days are spent in the field, monitoring animal populations and setting up camera traps. I'm used to being alone in the woods for long stretches, and I've never been particularly afraid of the dark. That changed one night in early November. It was around 10:30 p.m. when I returned to my assigned research cabin after a long day setting up cameras along a ridge near Pine Hollow. The air was cold, damp, and still, carrying the smell of wet pine and fallen leaves. Fog had begun to roll into the valleys, swirling between the trees like ghostly fingers. The dirt trail to the cabin was slick with mud, and I was careful with each step. My flashlight cut a narrow circle through the darkness,
illuminating the familiar outline of the cabin. I had stayed in this cabin multiple nights before. It was small, isolated, and rustic, a simple wooden structure with a single door, 2 windows, and a small stone fireplace. Nothing unusual had ever happened here. But as I approached, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. That was impossible. I always made sure it was locked before leaving each morning. My stomach tightened. I whispered to myself, maybe I forgot. Maybe the wind. I stepped closer, trying to rationalize it. The air around the cabin was unnaturally cold. My breath fogged in front of me. I pushed the door open gently. It creaked slowly, the sound unnaturally loud in the still night. Inside, everything looked normal. My gear was where I had left it, the firewood stacked neatly, my journal and camera equipment untouched. Nothing seemed out of place. But then I heard it. A soft, deliberate scrape from inside the cabin, like fingernails dragging across the wooden floor. My flashlight illuminated the corner near the fireplace. Nothing. I took a cautious step forward, heart hammering, and the scratching stopped. The silence was oppressive, heavy, as if the room itself were holding its breath. I whispered, "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice shook. No response. The cabin felt different, somehow alive. The shadows were darker, thicker, clinging to the corners. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. My hands trembled. I tried to tell myself it was fatigue or imagination, but the feeling in the pit of my stomach told me otherwise. Around 11 p.m., I decided to set up a small lamp near the fireplace and unpack my gear. As I bent down, I felt a sudden chill brush against my neck. My hair stood on end. I spun around. Nothing. The lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. That's when I heard it again. Soft, slow footsteps on the wooden floor behind me. I froze. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice cracking. Silence. Then the door slammed shut behind me, rattling the cabin. I spun around, heart racing, and tried to open it. Locked. My hands shook violently. The temperature inside dropped further, cold enough that I could see my breath. By 11:15 p.m., panic set in. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it around the cabin. Shadows shifted in the corners. Impossible angles, dark shapes that moved against the light. Then I saw it. A figure, standing in the far corner, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. Tall, unnaturally thin, shoulders hunched. Its face was smooth, featureless, but I could feel it staring directly at me. I stumbled backward, tripping over my bag. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. And then I heard it. A whisper, barely audible, like it was coming from inside my own head. "Leave." I ran to the fireplace, trying to find a weapon or something to defend myself. Nothing. My flashlight flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed me. I fumbled with it desperately. When it flickered back on, the figure was gone. I tried the door again. Locked. I could hear faint scratching now, circling the room, moving closer. My chest tightened. I whispered, "I'm leaving. Just let me go." The scratching stopped. Silence. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the shadows. By 11:30 p.m., I noticed the back window slightly open. I ran to it and tried to climb through, but the figure appeared suddenly in the corner, impossibly close, watching me. I froze. Its presence was suffocating, pressing against my chest like a physical weight. I could feel its awareness probing me, cold and precise. I scrambled through the window, landing in the wet grass outside. I didn't stop to look back. My boots sank in the mud as I ran blindly down the trail. Fog wrapped around me like hands reaching out, branches clawing at my arms and face. I dared not glance back. My flashlight bounced wildly in my hands, illuminating nothing but the forest. By 11:50 p.m., I reached my truck, parked at the edge of the service road. I fumbled with the keys, shaking violently. Once inside, I locked the doors, heart hammering. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Empty. The forest seemed normal again. Silent. Nothing moved. No footprints, no shadows, no figure. Only fog curling lazily among the trees. I drove to the ranger station without looking back, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind raced. What had I seen? What had followed me? The cabin itself seemed normal in daylight when I returned the next morning. Locked, undisturbed, as if nothing had happened. No scratches, no signs of anyone entering. Weeks later, I still patrol that area. The cabin remains, quiet, unassuming. But every time I pass it at night, the door seems slightly ajar, as if inviting me in. Sometimes I swear I hear the faintest scratching, the whisper of a voice telling me to leave. I haven't stayed in that cabin since, and I never will, because I know the moment I ignore it, it will be waiting, inside, patient, featureless, and aware, watching. And one day, it will reach out and pull me in.
The motel room that wasn't there. I'm 30, a freelance journalist who travels frequently for assignments. I often stay in small motels in rural areas, cheap, convenient, and usually quiet. But one night in late October, I checked into a motel in a remote part of Appalachia and experienced something I'll never forget, something I can't explain. It was around 11:15 p.m. when I pulled up to the Hollow Pines Motel. The neon sign flickered weakly, casting red and blue shadows on the wet asphalt. Rain had just stopped, leaving the air damp and heavy, carrying the faint smell of wet leaves and gasoline. The place looked deserted. Not a single car was parked outside the other rooms. I shrugged, told myself it was late and the area was quiet, and went inside. The lobby was dimly lit, the wallpaper peeling slightly, and a faint musty odor hung in the air. An older woman, the clerk, looked up from a ledger. She didn't smile, just nodded. She handed me a key card without a word. "Room 12, she said flatly. "Second floor, end of the hall." I thanked her and headed to the stairs. The interior smelled faintly of mildew and old carpet. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The hallway was long and narrow, silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. I reached room 12, swiped the key card, and opened the door. It was a small, typical motel room. Bed, desk, small TV, bathroom, nothing unusual. I set my backpack down and sat on the bed, exhausted. Around 11:45 p.m., I decided to take a shower before trying to sleep. The water was warm, the sound of it filling the small bathroom. Steam fogged the mirror. I was tired, my mind wandering to the assignment I had to finish the next day. When I stepped out, wrapped in a towel, I noticed something odd. My backpack wasn't where I left it. It was in the corner near the door, zipped shut. I hadn't moved it. My pulse quickened. "I must be tired," I muttered, trying to calm myself. I unpacked my laptop on the desk, planning to write a few notes. Around 12:10 a.m., I heard it. A faint creak, like someone walking across the floor behind me. I froze, listening. The room was silent, only the faint hum of the air conditioner. I told myself it was the building settling. Old motels creak. Then I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway outside the door. My heart leapt. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep in my backpack for emergencies, just in case. The footsteps stopped. Silence. My breathing was loud in my ears. By 12:20 a.m., I decided to check the hallway. I opened the door slowly. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls. I looked down the hall. Room 12 was there, but something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it. The door looked different, older, more worn, like it didn't match the other doors. I stepped back. My mind raced. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was tired. I went back inside, locked the door, and tried to write. Around 12:35 a.m., I heard a faint whisper from the corner of the room. Not a word I could understand, just a soft, sibilant sound like air escaping through teeth. My hair stood on end. I swung the bat toward the corner. Nothing. Empty. By 12:50 a.m., I needed to calm myself. I turned on the TV. Static. Not a channel problem, just static filling the screen with white noise. Then I noticed movement in the reflection of the dark screen. A shadow, tall, thin, featureless, standing in the corner. I froze. My pulse raced. The shadow tilted its head slowly, almost mocking, almost curious. I shouted, "Who's there?" My voice echoed strangely, muffled. The shadow didn't move. The room felt colder, the air thick with a metallic tang I couldn't identify. My hands trembled. I swung the bat again. Nothing. The shadow remained, patient, waiting. By 1 a.m., I had to leave. I ran to the door. Locked. The keycard didn't work. I tried to open it manually. Stiff, unyielding. Panic overtook me. I pounded on the door, shouting for the clerk. No response. Silence. The hallway outside sounded normal, but I could feel the presence in the room, pressing against me, patient, aware. I backed away, breathing hard. That's when I noticed something on the mirror. A handprint. Pale, elongated fingers pressed against the glass from somewhere. I turned slowly. The shadow was closer now, almost solid, standing where the fluorescent lights had reflected the room earlier. My chest tightened. The metallic smell was stronger, sore and sharp, burning my nostrils. By 1:15 a.m., I ran to the window, trying to open it. It wouldn't budge. Panic consumed me. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from under the bed, prepared to swing. The shadow moved slightly, tilting its head. No face, no eyes, only presence. Patient, deliberate. Suddenly the door clicked. Slowly. I froze. Nothing moved. But the doorknob turned on its own. The door creaked open a few inches. Silence. The hallway outside looked normal, but I knew I wasn't alone. The presence didn't leave. It just waited. I didn't sleep. I stayed in the corner with the bat and the fire extinguisher, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint rustling in the shadows. By dawn, when light finally filtered through the curtains, I dared to step outside. Room 12 looked normal. The door fit the frame. No handprints, no shadows. The motel was quiet, ordinary, unremarkable. Weeks later, I checked online. Hollow Pines Motel still exists, but no record of Room 12 being booked, renovated, or even existing. When I returned months later for another assignment, the end of the hallway where Room 12 had been was just a wall, a normal, solid wall. I've stayed in motels countless times since, but I avoid remote ones now. I still wake up sweating when I remember that night. The metallic smell, the whispering, the shadow waiting in the corner, the door that shouldn't have existed. I don't know what was in that room. I don't know why it followed me, and I know I'll never stay in that part of a motel again. Because if it finds another person, I don't think they'll leave.
I'm 27, a freelance photographer who often works in the Appalachian Mountains. I'm used to long, solitary nights in the woods, chasing sunrise shots or documenting wildlife. But one night in late October, I had an experience that I can't explain, and that has haunted me ever since. It started around 9 p.m. I had parked my old Jeep at the edge of a trailhead near Hollow Creek, intending to take night shots of the fog rolling over the hills. The air was damp and cold, the smell of wet leaves and pine thick in the woods. The sky was overcast, the moon barely visible. I carried a small backpack with my camera, flashlight, and a thermos of coffee. By 9:15 p.m., I was a few hundred meters into the forest. The trail was narrow, winding, and mostly silent. I loved the quiet, but that night it felt different, unnaturally still. Even the wind seemed absent. The forest felt waiting. As I paused to adjust my camera, I heard it, faint, distant whispering. I froze. The words weren't clear, but it sounded like someone calling my name. Ethan. I shivered, heart racing, telling myself it was the wind or my imagination. I kept walking, flashlight sweeping the trail. The whispering stopped. By 9:45 p.m., I reached a small clearing I'd photographed before. Fog rolled across the ground, thin but dense enough to blur shapes. I set up my tripod and began taking long exposure shots. That's when I noticed movement at the edge of the clearing, shadows among the trees. I thought maybe it was a deer or a stray animal, but nothing emerged, only shifting darkness, twisting between the trees. I packed up and started back down the trail around 10:15 p.m. The whispering returned, closer this time, clearer. My name, repeated softly. I stopped, shining my flashlight into the fog. Nothing. My pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around and leave. By 10:30 p.m., I realized I was lost, or at least I couldn't recognize the trail. The woods had changed. Trees seemed closer together, roots and underbrush denser. My footprints seemed to vanish as I tried to backtrack. The whispers grew louder, surrounding me from all directions. I called out, voice shaking, "Who's there?" Silence. Then my name again, whispered softly from behind me. I ran. The trail twisted unnaturally, branches whipping against my face and arms. Every step felt endless. The fog thickened, curling around me like hands reaching out. I thought I glimpsed a figure in the mist, a tall, thin shape with a featureless face. It didn't move, but seemed aware of me, patient, deliberate. By 10:50 p.m., I stumbled into another clearing. A faint moonbeam illuminated the area, but it wasn't the clearing I'd seen before. Trees leaned over, forming unnatural arches. Shadows moved among them, impossible angles that didn't belong. I could feel the presence of something, faceless, watching, patient. I stopped, gasping, trying to calm my racing heart. That's when I heard it, the whispers, now all around me. Ethan. Ethan. The words seemed to come from every direction. My flashlight flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed me. I could hear soft rustling, circling me in the fog. By 11:05 p.m., I was hyperventilating, trembling violently. I turned on my flashlight, swinging it around desperately. A figure appeared in the distance, standing at the edge of the clearing. Tall, thin, shoulders hunched. No face, featureless skin that reflected the faint moonlight. I froze. My chest tightened. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its attention, piercing, patient. I ran blindly, branches tearing at my clothes, roots snagging my boots. Every step I took, I felt it keeping pace, always at the edge of vision, always just behind the fog. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I screamed for help, but the forest swallowed my voice. By 11:30 p.m., I reached a trail marker I recognized, the last signpost before the ridge where I parked the Jeep. Relief washed over me, but when I looked ahead, the path seemed wrong, twisted. The marker pointed one direction, but the trail led elsewhere, deeper into thick fog and unfamiliar trees. My stomach dropped. The forest had shifted. I ran anyway, desperate. The whispers grew louder, urgent, almost mocking. "Ethan, come." My flashlight flickered wildly. In the brief bursts of light, I saw multiple figures standing in the fog. Tall, thin, featureless faces. They didn't move, just watched, patient, deliberate. By 11:45 p.m., I stumbled onto the ridge and saw my Jeep in the distance. My relief was immediate, but the forest behind me still seemed alive. Shadows twisted unnaturally, shapes shifting just out of sight. The whispers faded, but didn't disappear completely. I reached the Jeep, slammed the doors, locked them, and sat there shaking, chest heaving. The drive back to town was silent, except for the hum of the engine. The forest outside looked normal. Trees, fog rolling lazily, nothing unusual. But I knew what I had seen. I could feel it in my chest, the suffocating presence of something faceless, patient, waiting. Weeks later, I returned to the same trail during daylight. The clearings were familiar, the markers exactly where they should be. The forest was ordinary, peaceful, silent. But at night, I can still hear it, the faintest whispering, my name carried on the wind through the trees. I haven't gone back alone after dark, and I never will, because I know that if I do, the forest will remember. It will call my name. It will watch. And one night, it won't let me leave.